I'm honored to introduce Representative Chip Cravaack, who is a 24-year Navy veteran and third generation of his family to serve in the U.S. military. He has experience as a Navy pilot and, I think important for our event today, also a Northwest Airlines pilot. And that gave him the opportunity to see and experience and live in many parts of the United States and travel around the world. And then wisely, if any of you have ever been there, decide to make Northeast Minnesota his home and represent the 8th District from that state. In his Navy career, Captain Cravaack was honored with several awards and citations, including the Joint Service Commendation Medal. He has a Bachelor of Science degree from the United States Naval Academy. That's okay. Even though I went to West Point, my nephew and his wife went to the Naval Academy, so I'm over that. I'm honored and pleased. He has a master's degree in education from the University of West Florida, and he has also attended the Naval War College and the National Defense University. So we couldn't ask for anybody with a better resume to talk about the issue we have today. So please join with me in welcoming the Congressman.
And that's okay, Bob. Not everybody can make it into the Naval Academy. So I understand. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today, and I'd especially like to thank Ed Fuller for all the great work that he does here at the Heritage Foundation, and also Brian Darling and, of course, James Carafano for all the work that they are doing as well. I'd also like to take the time just to thank for the conversation this morning of Lieutenant Colonel Aiken and Mike Karn, FFDOA, and also Captain Tracy Price, who also was able to give me great insight of how this program actually got started. And of course the advocates that are currently working with FFDOs, Captain Mike Kaufman, and special thanks to Captain Fred Eisler for all the work that you've been doing as well for FFDO program. How this all started. I had my 8-month-old in my arms. The babysitter came in and said, "There's an airplane that hit one of the Twin Towers." And I said, "Oh, Cessna 172 must have gotten a little too close for a little sightseeing trip and hit the one of the towers." She said, "No, it was a big airplane." And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking of all the approaches into. I said, "Wow, could that have happened? Low visibility." I'm racing through all the scenarios in my mind how that could possibly occur. And then on the television, and then I saw the second jet hit. I got my son in my arms. Turned to my wife, and I said, "Our nation is under attack." That's how it started. Of course, I was glued to the television. Little did I know that I lost 2 friends that day. One a company mate and a classmate of mine. So this is personal for me. My country was under attack, and I lost some friends. And when I heard Secretary Napolitano at a most recent Homeland Security brief marginalize the dedication, the efforts, and quite frankly, the necessity of the federal flight deck program, I took that personal as well. One of the 3 things I'd like to touch upon today is what an FFDO means to our national security, the benefits of the FFDO program, and the challenges that I see on the horizon for FFDO. 9/11 woke us up. I, as a pilot that have flew countless hours in the commercial airline system, going through countless amounts of security, we knew, quite frankly, and to be honest, that our security was kind of lax. But this was a reality check. Nowhere in any scenarios that we had ever thought about would we have thought that an aircraft would have been taken over by terrorists and used as a weapon of mass destruction. The reality now, as it was then, is that we live in a very dangerous world with varied and morphing threats. While screening at the airport can reduce threats, the enemy is constantly probing our weaknesses. I think we're doing a pretty good job as for passengers coming through the airport. But you have to remember, the threat just does not stop there. The threat is for anyone who is in the shadow of that aircraft that can possibly touch that aircraft. So there are many and varied threats that are associated when a passenger gets on that aircraft and a pilot fires up those engines. We need the assets. Now, we understand that we are going to a risk-based, intelligence-based screening, and I highly support that, so that we focus our limited resources on known or unknown threats. But we must also, it is imperative, that we also have that safety net that is necessary in case of a failure of that system. In conversations this morning, we've already seen failures within that system for those that touch the airplane. We can't seem to pick up a paper without seeing how drugs are being placed on our aircraft, or how packages are being stolen. So there is somewhat of a weakness that we must address, and we must be able to counter if the situation does occur. FFDOs, along with their federal FAMs, Federal Air Marshals, are the last line of defense and the chief deterrent. But ultimately, they are the ones that are going to stop the terrorist from entering the cockpit and allowing that aircraft to be used as a weapon of mass destruction. Terrorists have to consider a couple things nowadays. Before they walk on that aircraft and they sit in that cabin, they're not quite sure if there's by multiple officers that are willing to take charge if need be. And if a FAM is not present, even more so, behind that cockpit door, there may be a federal flight deck officer ready to greet them with an H&K 40 caliber. Aviation security is a multi-layer approach, on the ground and in the air. Now, as soon as you buy your ticket, the security starts. You go through automatically, you start going through a security measures. But as much as the passengers, must take a look at them, I must reemphasize those that get into the shadow of the aircraft as well is equally important in taking a look at. Because we may have a passenger come through our screening process without a problem. But if there's something on that aircraft that they can attach themselves to, that is where the threat occurs, and that's where the FAMs and the federal flight deck officers come into play. In the air, there's several sources able to stop a terrorist attempt. Passengers, actually, are the heroes. We saw that happen on Flight 93, another Naval Academy graduate at the helm of that aircraft. Federal Air Marshals, that's the next, to protect the cockpit from anyone entering the cockpit. The reinforced cockpit door is a deterrent, but it's the federal flight deck officer behind that door that is going to stop the threat. Reinforced doors are important, and they will slow the progress of any attacker that wishes to commandeer the aircraft. But again, it will be the federal flight deck officer that stops the threat. Federal Air Marshals and federal flight deck officers are a team. They work very well together. Air Marshals are a vital part of that. Federal Air Marshal program, just to get in that program, you have to be the best shot of any federal law enforcement. But they're only present on a limited number of flights. The FFDOs expand that deterrence even more, and the ability to respond to the unexpected threat, which may be the Achilles heel of a risk-based, intelligence-based type of program. According to the estimates by the Airline Pilots Association, FFDOs only cost $15 per flight segment. Let me say that again. To protect an aircraft, to protect possibly the potential of thousands of people, the federal flight deck officer costs $15 per flight segment. Though the actual numbers are classified, currently FFDOs defend over 100,000 flight segments per month and 1.5 million flight segments per year. Thousands of FDOs have been FFDOs have been certified through the program, despite the budget hasn't grown since its initial inception. Currently, FFDOs are not allowed from receiving reimbursement for many of the expenses related to their own training. For example, I'm a former federal flight deck officer. I went down to Artesia, New Mexico for training down there. I did it on my days off, and it was my own costs to go down there to do that. To requalify each twice a year, obviously I want to remain proficient in my accuracy. So I spend money on my own ammunition to make sure that when I am qualified once again in 6 months, that I do well, because I take that as a personal goal to ensure that I am the best federal flight officer that I can possibly be. And remember, the federal flight deck officer does it on their own time and are not compensated for what they do. They do it because they're Americans. They do it because they believe in this country, and they do it because of the honor that they feel they must protect their passengers and their fellow Americans. Like I said, many undergo many personal expenses. And for pilots, if you're not flying, you've already gone away from your home 15, 16 days a month. In addition to that, going away to spend their own time once again, so they actually pay for the privilege of defending this great country of ours. Despite all this, even with the challenges that the federal flight deck officers have placed before them, the cadre has been growing of dedicated volunteers that have these sacrifices to protect Americans in the flying public. And they consider it an honor to do so. The first 44 federal flight deck officers that graduated in 2003 had a budget of $10 million. That grew to $25 million in 2004 and has kept that level since 2004. But this funding is now being eroded by a carve-out for crew defense. It's about $1.4 million out of that program. Last year, due to the funding levels, not one federal flight deck officer could have a background check. This is a challenge for us. The federal flight deck officer program is not expanding. Matter of fact, it's contracting. Under the current Obama administration has further proposed to cut the program in half, sending it to an eventual course, in my opinion, of elimination. Secretary Napolitano has made this quite clear to me, that they wish to erode the program down, and it's cutting back, and it doesn't fit the risk-based, intelligence-based security that they are looking at. I applaud the Secretary, again, on using intelligent and risk-based analysis. There always must be a safety net to capture those that might slip through that security-based screening. But even as we focus on threats of high or unknown risks, we must always remember that we cannot allow anything to slip through the cracks. FFDOs are there. They're one of the most cost-effective ways to both reduce risk, increase deterrence, and also respond to the safety of passengers and the flying public. The Secretary also fails to understand the threat. The threat doesn't necessarily come through the terminals of an airport. The threat is in the shadow of the airplane as well. It's a double threat, and all threats must be analyzed. That's why the safety net must always be there. In a testimony before the Committee of Homeland Security, she said the armed cockpit door was the last line of defense. But as I already said, it is the armed pilot that will most definitely be the last line of defense of preventing a commercial aircraft from being used as a weapon of mass destruction. That is why I'm very proud that our staff will be introducing very soon a fully offsetted bill, doubling the FFDO program from $25.5 million to $50.5 million for fiscal year 2013. Our goal is to enable the program to cover all qualified volunteers and increase the security level for the national public. I don't want anyone to be holding their kid and seeing another airliner go into a building. I don't want another passenger from Minnesota say, let's roll, and overtake an airplane knowing they're going to plunge to their own deaths. to protect the United States. That should never occur. And at $15 a flight segment, I think we can pay for it. Thank you.